Pre-stream dance, gotta do that. Pre-stream dance, gotta do that pre-stream dance. YouTube, you can't be this far behind. There we are. Hello! Welcome to the stream. My name is the Horb Gorb. I'm here. Let's close out this so that I'm not seeing two of myself and one's really delayed and that will distract me. Hi, everybody. It is I. I am here. Let me say hello to everybody. Hello, Rosariana. Hello, Gerbil. Hello, Xavier Pena. Hello, Fatal Error. Hello, Anime. Welcome, welcome. I am very, very excited for the stream today. This has been a stream I've been wanting to do since I started writing Das Vadanya, almost a year ago now. I think it was a little more than a year ago now. Yep. Hello, Fat Man. Welcome. That's right, we talked about this. No more drinking blood through the stream. It's all over your lips. Yeah, I just had to have a snack, Gerbil. I had to have a snack. You girls gotta eat, okay? So this stream this week is obviously the big question and answer session for Das Vadanya, which is, for those of you who, if you're here and you don't know what that is, it is an original novel that I spent the last year writing. Well, I guess a little more than a year. I've been done with it since, I think, March? Late March? Yeah, I finished writing it late March, and then I've just been posting the rest of the chapters up until now. Das Vadanya is a story set in 1908 in the Russian wilderness. It follows a noble family called the Volkovs, and a young tutor who comes to the Volkov manor in order to tutor the youngest sibling of the family. And he gradually kind of uncovers what sorts of fucked up shit they're doing in their basement. That's the plot, basically. So if you haven't read it, and for some reason you're here right now, this stream is going to be full spoilers for Das Vadanya. If you haven't read Das Vadanya yet, then enlighten and traumatize yourself. It's true. It is rather traumatic. You'll want to read the jacket blurb as you read it, because that's gonna tell you all the content warnings and all that stuff. That's probably a good idea to do, if that's something that worries you, because Das Vadanya is pretty dark. But obviously it's done now. I finished posting it 2 weeks ago, so now today is the stream where I am going to talk about it. And hopefully you guys can ask me some questions and I can answer them. My thought process on how to do this is that I've done a Q&A like this before, a very long time ago for an ARG I ran one summer. This one's going to work a little bit differently. What I figured what I would do is I would answer the question just straight off the bat that gets asked of every writer for every work they've ever done ever, which is, where did you get the idea for Das Vadanya? Because that is a very long, complicated question. And so what I figured is I'd start talking about that, and then you guys can just start leaving your questions in the chat. And then once I'm done talking about that in the next 20 minutes or so, we will have a bunch of questions that will hopefully kind of just start keeping us going until eventually we piddle out and I end the stream. So feel free to leave, obviously, any questions you have about Das Vadanya, about its development, about the process of writing it, about its story, its plot, its characters, specifically its ending, which I'm sure a lot of you have questions about. Also, am I too loud? I might be too loud. Let's turn me down a little bit. It might be too loud. Yeah. But also don't be afraid to leave your comments, your concerns, your snide remarks in the chat as I'm talking, because I will be keeping up with the chat as I'm talking, and there's few enough of you here for sure that I will absolutely be able to parse through and find the questions. So do not worry. Please, this stream is going to live and die in its interactions, so type as much as you possibly can. I would highly, highly appreciate it. The Russian Empire was an absolute mess of a place, but is a good setting for this sort of story. Absolutely. I wanted to include a lot of references to the historical context that was going on at the time. And I do, and specifically in chapter 6? Chapter 6. But, and then more throughout, obviously. So yeah, I'm going to start talking. Feel free to leave your questions. I'd appreciate it highly. So I know I'm not screaming into the void. That'd be nice. So my question is, what was your inspiration for having Romanov Russia being your setting? I'm about to get into that right now, actually. So Das Vadanya first became a thing because it was originally a Hetalia fanfiction. The original fanfiction idea I had was very, very different from what Das Vadanya became, but there's enough similarities between the two projects that I think it's best to start there. So basically, my junior year of high school, I wrote my first ever novel project. It was fanfiction. It was for Hetalia. It was about the Revolutionary War, because the Hetalia fandom's got two sides to it. It's a weeb project, lad. Switch off. It was the Mr. Sir reminds me. How does Vincent play into all of this? Mr. Sir reminds me. This stream, I ask that you keep the questions related to Das Vadanya, and you can ask questions about the broader scope of my narrative, because I've kind of dropped my hand now. But I'm not going to be answering questions about ED Valley today specifically, because I know that if he's not here already, there's at least one person in the chat tonight who has not read ED Valley but wants to catch up to it. So I want to keep this spoiler-free for ED Valley as possible. There might be some minor spoilers here or there, but nothing super big. So make sure you keep your questions to Das Vadanya. I'll be talking a fuck ton about ED Valley next week. So, anyway. Two sides to the Hetalia fandom. The crazy yaoi fangirls that everybody knows and hates, and the weird, more eclectic side of late high school and college kids who really like the idea of Hetalia, which is this silly little webcomic about anthropomorphic personifications of nations and countries, and making them real people and putting them in historical context, and playing with the idea of immortal beings and how much trauma that must provide to them. And I was in this side of the fandom. So I wrote a novel about the American Revolution. I still have a paper copy of it. My mom printed out like 5 copies because it was the first novel project I ever finished. And it's pretty shit. You can actually find it. It's called The Stars Are Eternal. I read the first chapter on my channel a really long time ago. So you can find the fanfiction if you want. But I did that, and then my next project that I was going to do, because I figured, well, I did the American Revolution, so let's do the Russian Revolution next. So I did a bunch of research on the Russian Revolution. I read 2 books about it, about that time period at least. And Xavier Pena, I'm going to answer your question in about 15 minutes. So this novel project was going to be called 8, and it was basically going to follow the life and times of the Grand Duchess Maria of the Romanov family, and her relationship with Ivan Braginsky, the personification of the country of Russia in Hetalia. The other important character was named Natalia. I believe her name is Arstovskaya, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. But she was the personification of the country of Belarus. And in Hetalia canon, her thing is that she's a crazy yandere that runs around with a knife screaming that she wants to become one with her big brother Russia again. You can see where the lines crossed there a little bit. But what happened was, instead of writing this project my senior year like I was planning on it, I ended up writing an original novel instead. And I realized that my fanfiction days were done, and I never went back. So I realized that I wasn't going to be writing 8. Also, fun fact, the reason it was called 8 was because at the end of the novel, after all of the Russian Revolution stuff had happened, Ivan Braginsky was going to shoot himself in the head 8 times, 1 for each member of the Romanov family and once for himself, but because he's an immortal nation, he can't die. So this is just really sad and pathetic. But I liked a lot of the ideas from 8. So I really wanted to reuse some of these ideas and reuse the characters. The original characterization of both Ivan and Natalia is pretty much the same as it was in 8. Ivan was always kind of this PTSD-riddled, trauma-filled character, and Natalia was always kind of this, like, slippery snake of a woman. Maria's personality was a little bit different because the real-life Grand Duchess Maria was the flirtatious and the spunky of the Romanov sisters. I really related to her a lot. Ironically enough, weird bit of serendipity, we were born almost exactly 100 years apart, which is a weird coincidence. But she was always the one who was always flirting with all the soldiers that were, guarding the Romanov family and stuff. It was cute. She was cute. I'm older than she was when she died now, I think, which is yikes. But yeah, so her personality ended up changing quite a bit. But while I was writing this first novel as a thought exercise to keep my brain occupied, I basically transformed 8 into the bones of what Das Vadanya is today. I realized that I wanted it to still kind of be in, I wonder if she flirted with Grigory Rasputin. Probably not. I think most of the Romanov family besides Alexander was pretty weirded out by him. So in Das Vadanya, basically I converted it, the story. I realized that I wanted to still be set in that Edwardian era Russia, essentially, in that Romanov era Russia. And I wanted to still involve Bloody Sunday as a plot device. But I decided that I was going to have them be a small family in the middle of nowhere, and they were going to be doing weird occult shit. And mainly I decided this because this was right around the point in my life where I started reading a lot of H.P. Lovecraft. Towards the tail end of my junior year, I picked up the Barnes & Noble complete H.P. Lovecraft's works, and over the summer between my junior and senior year, I utterly devoured it. So I realized that I wanted Das Vadanya to kind of be the closest to straight up cosmic horror I ever get, because all of my stories have kind of that element. I'd consider myself more of a cosmic punk writer than a cosmic horror writer because I see more wonder in the cosmos than fear. But I really wanted there to be that, like, that this was kind of my cosmic horror story that I was going to write. And 1908 is a little bit earlier than H.P. Lovecraft's stories, but it's kind of that same general time period. And so I decided to set it then. The 3 main characters became siblings. I hadn't quite called them the Volkovs yet, but they would shortly gain the name Volkov. And their personalities basically were kind of the same. I realized very early on that I wanted Ivan and Natalia to be an incestuous couple simply because Chapter 4 of Das Vadanya is ripped wholesale from 8. There are 2 scenes that got ripped from 8. The original idea. One is Chapter 4. The entirety of Chapter 4. Even the choking bit, the entirety of Chapter 4 is basically ripped straight from 8. That was the scene that was originally going to happen. And yeah, I've always written kind of messed up stuff a little bit. But then the other scene that crossed over was the Gold Fleck vodka. So in the original version of 8, instead of Natalia confronting Mishka with an "Are you worthy of drinking this?" it was her confronting the Grand Duchess Maria and going, "We are immortal nations. You are a 16, 17-year-old girl. You don't get to drink this. Okay, back off my fucking mans." And then she was gonna fuck off for the rest of the book, and then she was gonna come back at the end after all the shit had been gone through, and she was gonna place it back in front of Maria and go, "Okay, you know what? I'm sorry. Here you go. You deserve this." So yeah, that was kind of that whole thing. Those are the 2 scenes that got crossed over. And part of the reason why they're all siblings a little bit, because Big Brother Russia. Woohoo! Pretty immediately after I had the 3 kind of older siblings in place, and I realized that the bulk of the story was going to be this mystery of figuring out what they were doing in their basement. I didn't really know what they were doing in their basement yet, but I knew it was going to be something they were doing in their basement. I realized that I needed a character that was going to act as a POV character to bring us in, to help us uncover the mystery. And so I figured I'd make him a tutor. I'd been watching a lot of Downton Abbey with my parents, and tutors are in a good position where they're not quite as low as servants, but they're not nobles either. They're kind of in a weird middle spot, and I liked that for a character. But I realized as well pretty immediately that I did want him to have kind of this romance with Maria, who had become much more dreamy, much more airheaded, much less on the ground, because she was going to be involved in a much more prominent dream-related plot that didn't end up happening, because I just didn't know what I wanted to do with it, and I realized it was distracting us from the main plot. But I wanted them to have a romance, which meant that Maria could not be under 18. She could not be of a tutorable age, because I already had one kind of fucked up relationship in terms of Ivan and Natalia, and I really wanted Maria and the tutor to kind of contrast that, to juxtapose that, to be like this is a normal, healthy relationship. This is a fucked up relationship. And so yeah, I made him. Notice I haven't been calling him Mishka because he wasn't named Mishka until pretty shortly before I started writing Das Vadanya. More on that in a bit. I'm going to say that a couple times throughout the spiel. But, so, I realized that I needed someone for him to tutor. That's where Katya comes in. Katya's personality was originally way different than it ended up being. She was originally a straight-up child psychopath. She was going to be another kind of illustration of how fucked up the Volkov family was. Hedgehog, you really need to get away from the basement allegations. Yeah. I came up with a lot of these ideas when I was 16, 17, 18, because now we're slowly starting to move into when I went to college. I freaking love Kat. Thank you. Dragon loves her too. Again, more on that later. But Katya's original characterization was she was just going to be a straight up child psychopath. She also wasn't going to have a lot to do with the plot. She was also going to be there as a plot device essentially to get Mishka in. We were going to have one scene where he attempts to tutor her and she's a freak. And then she was going to come in towards the end of the book and gleefully start giggling while she's chopping up body parts. That was going to be her whole thing. It's not how it ended up being. But, again, we'll get to that later. So this main central plot was in place. With Katya came the advent of me realizing, well, they're probably building a body down there, because that seems like the logical conclusion why there would be so many tutors running through this place, is that they're using their parts to build a body. Because of course they are. I didn't really know what the antagonistic force was yet. I knew that it was going to be an anomaly, because anomalies had been a thing in my brain since I wrote my original novel, Theone, along with Cowl. The other and the anomalies were already kind of in place when I was about 17. The anomalies acted very differently than they do now, which is one of the reasons why I haven't read more of Theone on the channel. But, yeah. Wow, I keep losing my train of thought. This is great. So they were in place. I didn't really know what the Volk was quite yet. I knew that there was going to be an anomaly involved, and I knew that they were building a body for the anomaly, but I didn't really know about all of the specifics. I didn't really know what the Volk's deal was or who he was. That would slowly begin to change as I figured out that Jack was a character. Fun fact about Jack, his name was not originally Jack. You see, Jack's name originally was Douglas Bailey. Because those of you who've read my stuff know that I came up with Doug Bailey when I was about 15 or 16, and I wrote him in a story, I abandoned the story, and then years later I put him in Edie Valley. What you guys don't know is that Doug haunted me for fucking years. Doug Bailey Oh, I see the reactions. The reactions are coming in now. The chat's catching up. So Doug Bailey haunted me for fucking years. I was trying desperately to find a story to put him in. Like, this idea of this kid whose sanity was questionable and who was, hi Dragon, and who was like his condition was being made worse by external forces outside of his control, haunted the fuck out of me. There were so many different plots that I tried to put Doug in, and the last one, before I found a place for him in Edie Valley, which I'm very glad he ended up in Edie Valley, not in Das Vadanya, was Das Vadanya. So, yeah. Oh my god, everybody's fucking freaking out. There's a certain episode in Edie Valley that might make a little more sense, now that you know this information. I'm not gonna tell you which episode it is, but, some of you might be ringing some bells for you. But I had this idea of this character who was stuck in a room going fucking crazy because there's fucking voices in his head, like Doug's original kind of schizophrenia in This Is Not a Cancer Book. And I realized, well, we need a body part for him to be missing because they're building a body, and he's the first tutor that was here, and he's the one that got stuck with the anomaly around him or in him or whatever. And so I Doug, oops, all Doug. So I decided, well, let's make it an ear, because that's dramatic. That's not gonna like disable him, but it's gonna look fucking cool. So he was originally Douglas Bailey. Then pretty shortly after that, I ended up sticking Doug in Edie Valley, and so obviously the old tutor Jack ceased to be Doug pretty quickly, but he was originally Doug. Oh, I'm so giddy that was such a big reveal. That was fun. That was fun. I'm going to be re-listening to it this week, so I'll look for it. Hey, Rex Taco, welcome! You missed a little bit of me talking about the origins of Das Vadanya. I'm about halfway through, so if you want to listen to it back at some point, it's pretty interesting. But welcome. I'm glad you're here, man. So, right. Ada came pretty shortly after Jack. Doug just shows up everywhere. It's true. I love Doug Bailey. He's my baby. Oh, you are such a schemer. So Ada showed up pretty shortly after Jack, because I realized, like Mishka needing to be a POV to bring us into the mysteries, the tutor character wasn't going to have a motivation to find Jack, because by this point the tutor's motivation was to kill Yvonne. So Yvonne, the tutor would want to figure out what the deal was with the family so that he could kill Yvonne more efficiently, but he wasn't going to be interested in finding Jack. So I made Ada in order to be a character. Ada is probably my favorite. Thank you, Mr. New challenge: find the Doug reference in every Hedgehog story. He's in all of them, whether we know it or not. It's true. So Ada came pretty quickly after. Again, I'd been watching a lot of Downton. Hey, thanks for joining us, Fat Man Rolling. I've been watching a lot of Downton Abbey, so I realized, well, we have the nobles, we have a tutor who's kind of stuck in the middle. We need somebody to represent the servants, and obviously Cowell was going to be the butler. This was apparent from the beginning. Yeah, no, Rose, I didn't actually base Ada off of Kurumi at all. That wasn't really an influence. More so, an influence was me and myself, specifically for reasons I'll get into in a second. So I wanted another servant character in order to balance out the cast a little bit. So I included her, and I realized pretty quickly she was gonna have to be Jack's sister, because that makes a lot of sense. And originally Ada was going to be a witch. Her deal with Cowell was that she was going to be a witch, like Cindy. Partially for the reasons that I didn't think I'd gotten to explore the witch stuff with Cindy enough. I still don't think I ever did. I hopefully will with a witch character someday, but I didn't really get to, just because the way the story went. I didn't plot it out well enough. I didn't plot out my stories until actually pretty recently. I started plotting them out. Dawson I was the first project that I really actually outlined. So Ada was originally going to be a witch. And her deal was still with Cowell. I realized that was going to be too much. It was going to be too out of left field. It was going to have to take too much time to explain it and justify it, and I wasn't going to get any time to spend focusing on it. So I made her deal much more simple. I gave her a power that was going to be useful to her, and left it at that. I do always feel bad, because Ada's the one character I feel like Ada's the one element of Das Vadanya that I don't feel like I did as well as I could have, because once she finds Jack in chapter 10, Ada kind of disappears for most of the second half of the book, because I didn't have anything to do with her. Her purpose as a character was to connect us to Jack. And I think I pulled it together ultimately by literally just drawing attention to the fact that she's done nothing. But yeah. I shortchanged her a little bit, unfortunately. The last bit of trivia I want to talk about with Ada before I move on is that her name, Ada Steele, is actually the name of my great-great-great-grandmother. I think it's 3 greats. It might be 2, but it might be 3. In Britain, I had a relative who lived ages ago named Ada Steele, and I thought it was the coolest fucking name ever. For a while, it was going to be my pen name before I decided it was a little too edgy. Even though it's the name of a real life person. I went and I saw her grave. My grandmother and my parents and I went to England one summer between my 8th and 9th grade year. And we saw her grave. She wasn't from Birmingham. She was from Rochester. But the name of your grandmother, oh my god, it isn't historical fiction. It's just historical. It's true. It's true. Honestly, now that you say it, I can see Kurumi. I didn't really intend. I think Ada is actually a pretty different character from Kurumi, but oh well. So yeah, so Ada was in place. She was kind of the last major character to fall in place because Cal was obviously there all the time. And it was right around this time where I kind of figured out the deal with the Volk, because I was doing some just translation research for an entirely unrelated fantasy project that was in itself a precursor to the Sisters Dukov. And I had found out that the word for wolf in Russian was Volk, and the word for war was Vol. And I thought that was really cool. And I realized, because it was right around this time where the final twist of the plot, that the twist isn't that they're building a body, the twist is that the body's a fake out, and, you know, Natalia's going to just snatch the Volk's godhood from him and become a god, essentially, become an anomaly. So I realized that was going to be the name. It was the Volk, she becomes the Vol. It'd be a cool little thing. It'd be a really cool little thing to do. So then they became the Volkovs. That's when Chapter 14 kind of became a thing. Chapter 14, it kind of became a thing a little earlier, and I realized I wanted to have symbolism with wolves a little bit earlier, but the naming convention came in a little bit later. And I realized that the Volk was kind of this very animalistic kind of god of want, this kind of just entity of want, and craving, and you know, I wanted him to be, because the truth was very monotone. The truth was very, I wanted the Volk to be very different from the truth, without getting too far into it. Again, don't want too many spoilers, but I wanted, you like your god characters, don't you? I love my anomalies, baby. My anomalies, they're my babies. They're my concepts. No, so now you're distracting me, hopping into your damn office chair. All right. So yeah, so that was basically the last pieces to kind of fall into place, were the Volk's identity and stuff. And then I got into the nitty gritty right before I started writing it, and I realized one thing. I needed a name for the main character, for the tutor, because up until this point, his name had been Nikolai. No relation to Nico Borisov at all in this case, not like Doug Bailey. Congrats again for making me wildly uncomfortable. Thank you, Mr. Sir. Yeah, no, he wasn't Nico at all. In fact, I had named Nico partially due to the fact that I was like, well, I want to use this name, and I might not ever write Das Vadanya, so I wanted to use the name Nikolai, so I did. But then, of course, I came back to writing Das Vadanya, and I realized, oh, yeah, I need a different name for him, because I have Cowl in this. So if Cowl's in this and there's a character named Nikolai, they're going to think he's Nico, and I don't want them to think he's Nico. So I was looking up common Russian names to go there, and I'm going through the list. Already using Ivan, have already used Nikolai. Boris is not right at all. Vladimir is not right at all. Dmitry is Cowl's cover name, so we can't use that. Vasily I'm already using. Mikhail I've already used as a Oh my god. Oh dear. Oh my. He could be Mikhail Borisov, couldn't he? Yes, because that works out. Because at the end, the reality is annihilated. Oh my god, that works out. Oh my god, that works out. And then Maria is Nico's mom. Oh my god. And I had a moment where I realized how all this shit could fit together. And I went, yes! So, for those of you who don't know, a lot of like those really long foreshadowing things I do, some of them are absolutely on purpose. So like, as you'll see as we get into Arc 3 of Edie Valley, I have known where Doug's character has been going since at least the midpoint of the first arc. So sometimes I do have things just planned out in advance like that. Sometimes I do not. I left that is the best feeling ever, when everything clicks into place like that. Absolutely. Love it. It just makes me so giddy when I realize stuff. But I left Nico's mom very vague on purpose, just in case I ever decided that I ended up figuring out who she was. But I made her vague because you didn't really need to know who she was. She wasn't really a character. Like, she didn't really like need to be a character. So I didn't make her one. But then I realized how it could work, and obviously I hadn't said anything about Nico's mom, except that she died. So it's perfect, because I could slot Maria right into it. That also meant that Katya had to be Sonia's mom. which was a little weirder for me to figure out because obviously Sonia's last name was Borisovna, and by usual typical conventions that should mean that her father was Mikhail's brother. He doesn't have a brother. So basically I just decided to kind of just weirdly put into place that after they left their reality and came to Edie Valley, because they came to Edie Valley obviously, that Katya would just take on Mikhail's last name because him and Maria were already basically getting married. And it was just going to be safer for her, since he had started his big crime family, it was going to be safer for her to have his last name so that she can say, I'm Katya Borisov, and people go, oh shit, okay, back the fuck off. And then I figured probably something similar for her husband, or if not, maybe they just didn't take each other's names and Sonia just took her mom's last name. To be fair, I also think Katya would probably not really want to be a Volkov anymore anyway. And that reminds me to talk about the final piece of the puzzle before we get into the questions. The final... Nico's mom does, in fact, got it going on. It's true. The final thing that changed about Das Vadanya actually happened after I started writing it. Because, like I said originally, Katya's original characterization was a child psychopath. And then something happened. I mean, changing her name to become part of the Mafia family does make sense. It's true. It's true. And that's how I justify it ultimately. Something happened with Katya. Dragon really liked her. So chapter 2, I read chapter 2 to Dragon because Dragon acted as my beta reader for Das Vadanya. I read all the chapters to him way before any of you ever heard any of them. There's the devil horns. Dragon really, really liked her. And I realized that if Dragon really liked her, Dragon is very representative of the people who like my stories. Like, Dragon has very similar opinions usually to most people that like my works. So I realized that if he liked Katya, everybody else was gonna like Katya. And if everybody else liked Katya, when Katya didn't really do anything for most of the plot, people were gonna just keep asking me where the fuck Katya was. So I realized that I had to have Katya be more involved, and I had to figure out what her character actually was. And so I started thinking about it, and I realized that it would be much more interesting if instead of just her being a psychopath, she was just another victim of this machine. And unfortunately, it makes Natalia a little less sympathetic than I had maybe originally intended her to be, just because of her treatment of Katya. But, well, he was right about Katya. Yeah, I figured. But I realized that it would be much more interesting to base Katya's personality off of a hypothetical version of my own versus just have her be a generic psychopath. Because there's video footage of this, of me at about age 3 to 4, talking about this to a camera. I made my mom record me talking about everything I knew about the human body, because I was obsessed with the human body from about the ages of 3 to 5. I had so many picture books that described the process of the human body, specifically the digestive system I was very interested in. When all other little girls wanted to be ballerinas, I wanted to be a baby doctor. I wanted to deliver babies. If Katya wanted to be more involved, then she should have participated in the stream by donating to Stream Elements. You know what? It's true! She could have donated to Stream Elements. But I was always very encouraged. My two special interests as a young child were the human body and ghosts and other creepy crawly stuff. Both those things are obviously still very prominent in what I do. But I was always very encouraged in my love of learning about these things. Goodbye, Mr. Sir. Have a fun dinner. I was obsessed with the human body as a child. Statements by totally normal people. Dude, you guys have known I'm not normal for a very long time. And I was always very encouraged. You know, like I said, I have video footage of me talking about this that my mom recorded. And I thought about, you know, in 1908, I would not have been so highly encouraged. I would have been viewed as bizarre and weird and off-putting and like a little... I ended up wanting Katya to be perceived like a psychopath, but she isn't a psychopath. And so I kind of based her personality a little bit off of what I would have been like if I'd been raised by a different family in a different time period. If I had not been encouraged in my pursuits of knowledge, as weird as they might be for a 3-year-old. So yeah, Katya came into place, and I was writing the book, baby! So that's the story of Das Vadanya. It took me fucking 30 minutes to get through. I apologize. I'm sure all of you are bored out of your fucking minds by now. But let's start in on the questions. All right, we're gonna scroll all the way up to this top. We got some questions. We got lots of comments, so at least we'll have some questions here. Okay, let's find the first one. I think Russian is a fascinating language, especially as they speak it even faster than us Scots do. My question is, what was the inspiration for the Romanov Russia being your setting? Besides the fact that it was based on 8, the reason I wanted to do 8 in the first place was because I liked Ivan Burginsky from Italia. But it really made me do research on Imperial Russia. And I found that it was a time period that actually really fucking fascinates me. Like, specifically Romanov Russia. Because I read a book about the Romanov sisters. I can't remember what it was called. I have it on my bookshelf. If anyone's really interested, I can find it and I can tell you what it's called. And then I read another book a little bit later on the Edwardian period in general, just what was going on all over Europe and the United States at that time. And there's obviously the whole big chapter that's about Russia and about Manchuria and about the Russian Revolution and all that stuff. So it's just a period of time that really fascinates me. I also really love Russian accents. I think they're fun. And that's what I'm just my excuse to have a whole book where I can just voice people with Russian accents. So, yeah. That was, yeah. What is Valentine's wife's name? And also, could you confirm that Ada and Ivan are dead? I assume when Edie Val comes back, we'll see more of Mikhail, yes. I never came up with a name for Valentine's wife. So she doesn't have one. I have a lot of dead mothers that just don't have names or personalities or anything involving them. She doesn't have a name. I don't know what her name is. Ivan and Ada are absolutely dead. They're very dead. They're not coming back. I promise you that. I have exceptions to the rule of dead characters not coming back, but when characters die, they at the very least do not have any more interaction with the characters who are living. At least in conventional ways. I guess you consider certain characters related to Doug as, but they're not really those characters anymore. Those characters are dead. I don't want to get too into it, but at the very least, I want death to mean something. So even though there are like 2 notable exceptions, kind of, about the death rule, when my characters die, they die, and they are dead. Ivan and Ada are both very dead, so they're not coming back. We will see a little bit more of Mikhail in the next arc of Edie Valley. He's not going to be like a major prominent character or anything like that. The last arc of Edie Valley is going to go off in a kind of weird direction. But we will not be seeing that much of Mikhail, but we will be seeing a little bit of him. Gerbil, like Gerbil said, Xavier Pena, please ask as many questions as you want. How far do the events of, well, it's not a game, it's a book, but they take place in 1908, like I said earlier. What made you decide to use Mikhail as the main character? It was kind of a coincidence. Like I said, that I just needed a name, and I came across Mikhail again, and I went, oh, but it'd be such a good name to name him Mishka. But then as I thought about it, it made more and more sense, and I thought about the implications of this character who can't even shoot Ivan becoming this fucking crime boss and basically becoming Ivan, essentially, and I thought of the implications of that, and I thought it was very cruel. And you know me, I like cruel. So I ended up realizing it was a very good idea and going for it. I guess I can use this opportunity to talk about his name a little bit, because he obviously doesn't go by Mikhail in Dasana. He goes by Mishka, because that's kind of a diminutive nickname, because I wanted to at least differentiate him a little bit, like, because again, Mikhail doesn't, like, if I had called him Mikhail throughout the whole book, it would have seemed very formal, would have seemed very stiff, it wouldn't have really seemed like him very much. So I knew I wanted to use a diminutive nickname, because diminutive Russian nicknames are cute as shit. The more common nickname for Mikhail is actually Misha. But I didn't go with Misha. Specifically because of Misha Collins. I was a pretty big fan of Supernatural for quite a few years. And I knew if I used Misha, I was just gonna think of that fuck every single time I wrote his name, so I could not use Misha. So I used Mishka instead, which I learned was another diminutive you could use. So that's kind of the origin of his name. Who was your favorite character from Das Vadanya to write for? Ivana's personally my favorite, maybe tied with Mishka himself and Ada Steele. Oh god. You know, it changes daily. I had a lot of fun writing Ivan. I had a lot of fun writing Natalia. I had a lot of fun writing all of them. It's really hard for me to pick a favorite. It's really, 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 really hard. Because I like all of them in many different ways. But I think if I absolutely have to pick one, it's probably Jack. Chapter 11 was my favorite fucking chapter to write. Somebody asked me about Chapter 11. Just do it. Just ask me about Chapter 11 so I can talk about it. And I will catch up in the chat, and then I'll talk about Chapter 11 when we get back to it. Wait, 8? Go back. I missed 1 through 7. History fact. Russian Revolution happened in 1917, 1918, and the Soviet Union was formed in 1922. In between those dates, there was a civil war. Yep. So there was a period of a lot of strife where the Romanovs were kind of dethroned, and they were kind of living very poor and destitute. There was a huge illness that went through the whole family at one point. Several of the sisters lost all their hair because of it. It was not good, but there was a couple years of strife and just civil war before it all got sorted, as these things tend to do. What the hell happened to Hedgehog's flirtatious? I flirt with every single person I know. Yes, I'm flirtatious. Get it from my mom. My mom. This is entirely a tangent. My mom had a. So my parents had a friend. They have a friend. He's still their friend. My mom had known him longer than he's known his wife. And his wife came into the picture, and my mother caused a little bit of strife because my mom's a casual flirter. She flirts with everybody. I get it from her. I don't really consider flirting to be like a sign of like actual interest usually, unless I'm doing it a very specific way. She made his future wife very uncomfortable because she thought my mom was legitimately flirting with him, and my mom had to explain, no, this is just how I talk to people. So I'm very much the same way. Let's see. Vasily. What was your inspiration for him? Ooh, that's a tough one. I hate to admit it. He was also just kind of like just a plot device to get Mishka to where he needed to be. I have characters who are plot devices who need plot devices to get them to where they need to be. This is why I have Cowl, so it stops from being too complicated. Cowl is just my plot device that I just put in places when I need things to happen. So that's why Cowl exists. As far as Vasily goes, I just wanted Mishka to have somebody older to look up to. Because Vasily, in a way, does kind of contrast with Ivan. Because Ivan is also a guy who's a couple years older than Mishka, who he could potentially look up to. Obviously, you do not want to look up to Ivan, of all people. But Vasily was kind of supposed to be like this ideal, this communist, the socialist ideal for Mishka to kind of like base himself up. And the irony is, if you read between the lines, Vasily himself isn't even really super into the whole communism, socialism thing. Mishka's the one who's really into it. But he sees Vasily as like, this is what we're fighting for. You know, this is what we're fighting for, so that Vasily can live a better life. He's such a smart, fun, awesome guy. He can live a better life, and he can not have to sell drugs to actually be able to live. Also a fun fact. This is kind of a very much a subtext kind of thing. And I didn't really draw a lot of attention to it because he probably wouldn't have even realized this himself at the time, because it's fucking 1908 in Russia. Mishka was kind of in love with Vasily a little bit. It wasn't like he didn't like actively like have a big crush on him and want to like kiss him and stuff, but like Mishka was if they had been in a different time period, in a different place, and Mishka had been in different circumstances, yeah, they might have been a thing. But yeah, no, Mishka is in love with him for sure. So Mishka's some kind of bisexual, I guess. Let's see. What did you ever base the Volk on? The Volk is based on the darkest parts of my brain. The Volk and Abigail Hodge would not get along at all because they're based on very different parts of the same part of my brain. Yeah. How much do you know about the history of Russia before the revolution? I don't know a whole ton. My expertise is specifically on that period of time. I've read a little bit of War and Peace, so I know a tiny little bit about the Napoleonic era, but I've only read the first 2 books of it. I don't know that much. I'm intending to expand my knowledge of Imperial Russia. I have a couple of books laying around that I need to get to reading. One specifically on Catherine the Great, because she seems like a cool lady. Admittingly, I don't know a whole lot, but that will change eventually. Okay. Yes, everybody's talking about how much they love Kat. I assume that having Mikhail in there only came after Edie Valley because he was easy to slot in. Like I said before, yeah, it was mostly just a coincidence. Mikhail and Edie Valley came way before Mishka did, kind of, at least in his current characterization. I have so many goddamn questions about Cowell. I legit freaked out when I heard his accent. I mean, you can feel free to ask me about Cowell. I don't know how much I'll be able to answer about him, but I can at the very least give some ominous hints about Cowell. To be honest, I don't even fucking know what Cowell is some of the time. All right, we've gotten to the parts where everybody's freaking about Doug. Okay, let's see. 8 is probably my favorite. What is your favorite moment from this product? Oh, that's another good question. First, let's see if anybody asked me about it down below. Let's see. Absolutely not bored. Please keep talking. Okay, so nobody's asked me about it yet. Noah, ooh woo, I won't watch this because spoilers, but I hope it's going well. I love you, Dragon. Please answer my calls, please. Oh my god, please. I'm so afraid without you. I miss you and I miss you and I miss me and I just want me again, but I can't do that without you. Please just, this is my stream. No, this is a Dragon stream. He can't hear you. He's dead. I killed him. Okay. So, in that case, I will use this opportunity to talk about Chapter 11. Chapter 11 is the one that's about Jack. That's about the big reveal about what the Volk really is and what Jack's whole deal is. And that chapter gave me fucking conniptions trying to write, because I had such grand aspirations for this chapter, because Chapter 11 is kind of the turning point. I write my stories in both 3-act and 2-act structures simultaneously. Das Vadanya has a 3-act structure. I'd say chapters 1 through about 6 are Act 1. Chapters 7 through about maybe 12 to maybe 13 to 4. I'd say 13 are Act 2, and then 14 to the end is Act 3. Das Vadanya also has a 2-act structure. The first act being the setup, which is chapters 1 through 10, and 11 through... and actually probably 12 through 19 being the payoff, with chapter 11 kind of as that transition chapter between the 2 acts. So I really needed it to be the big central piece, the central moment where, okay, here's what's happening, here's where I lay my fucking cards on the table, here's what's going on, before we begin the downhill descent into madness. So I had these very grand ambitions for this chapter. It took me a very long time to figure out what I was going to do with it, because obviously I needed to illustrate in some way Jack and the Volk's relationship, because for a while in Das Vanya's development, they were way less like they are. Jack in general as a character was way less coherent. Again, I had this weird dream plot idea. The idea was that Jack was only going to be able to communicate in dreams. In their original relationship, the Volk was kind of almost only pseudo possessing Jack. He was kind of just hanging around in the air around Jack, but he and only Jack could hear him. But he was slowly driving Jack insane, and Jack was basically incoherent in conscious waking hours because of the Volk. Obviously that changed as I kind of realized more what Anomaly's deal was, how they worked, all that stuff. So I needed a way to illustrate exactly how their relationship worked. Exactly how their minds were slowly melding into one weird amalgamation, while simultaneously, even as that's happening, Jack is ultimately going to lose. You know, the Volk might be a little bit altered because there might be still some remnants of Jack's personality left in him, but if this situation goes on for much longer when we see him, Jack will lose. Will Dust Bunny be put on Spotify? Will it be voice acted at some point? Is it connected to ED Valley, or is it a separate universe? Dust Bunny will be put on Spotify. I just haven't gotten around to doing it. Yes, I'm going to. By voice acted, you mean with voice actors, I assume. That is a very long-term plan. I hope to do that with all of my stories eventually, but I actually need the time, the money, and the ability to do that. Is it connected to ED Valley, or is it a separate universe? I'm not answering that question, Noah. Read it and you find out. So, like I was saying, that Jack's gonna lose. And I took a lot of inspiration actually from Higurashi on this. So for those of you who only follow this channel and don't follow the analysis one as much, I have a whole analysis series I've been doing on the visual novel Higurashi When They Cry. And Higurashi When They Cry is fantastic in the writing department, specifically because it does such a good job of putting you as the reader in the position of the main character. And I don't mean like feeling sympathy or empathy for the main character. I mean, it is in its text separately making you feel the exact same way that the main character is. It's really hard to describe without watching. As the first video has a very good demonstration of this idea. Watching the first Higurashi video, you can kind of see what I mean. And I really, really wanted to capture that idea, to capture that emotion, to capture that feeling, to make the audience feel like they're also going fucking insane, and making them feel just uncomfortable and weird and like icky in their own skin and just I don't like this. So I came upon the idea of the dual narration, because I write almost exclusively in third person, but my third person narration borrows a lot of elements from first person. I vary up my language a lot based on what character I'm from the POV of. So like Doug talks differently than most of the characters in Das Vadanya talk, but Yvonne, even within Das Vadanya, Yvonne talks very differently than Mishka does, than Natalia does, than Maria does. I'd like to vary up my language within the narration to a lesser degree than dialogue, but to at least a somewhat noticeable degree, I hope. And so I realized that this section was going to be utilizing its narration to illustrate this. So I spent a really long time figuring out the balance between Jack and the Volk and how to slowly basically transition the chapter from being all Jack to all the Volk at the end, while making it seem natural and making it seem like it worked. And when I finally figured it out, no, that's the chapter I'm proudest of, for sure, is chapter 11. I think it stands alone as just a fucking masterpiece. That's the one thing I'm not usually pretty like, oh, my work is amazing and it's art and it's 100% great and awesome and fun, unless I'm talking to Dragon. But I'm very proud of chapter 11. I'm very proud of chapter 11. Okay, cool. Anyway, that took a very long time to answer, so let's continue. Ada was a very weird character for me until Cowell showed up and threw me all the way off. Yeah. That's his purpose. There are two things in Das Vadanya that I put specifically that are supposed to make you start thinking in specific ways. One is that Mishka's name is Mikhail Borisov, but I made that pretty subtle. Natalia says his name once in the first chapter, his full name, and then it's not really, or maybe Yvonne says it too. It's said once or twice in the first chapter, and then it's really not mentioned again for a very long time. I drop it maybe one or two more times throughout the course of the entire book. But that's if you're good enough to, if you're thinking enough to catch it, then that should be kind of a little signifier that, oh, this might be more connected to Hedgehog's other stuff than we think it is. Cal is the much more obvious, apparent version of that. Obviously I don't name drop him until chapter 9. He's the butler. He's got a Russian accent. He's the butler. He seems like an entirely different character. And then all of a sudden in chapter 2 he starts in on the British accent. And that's one element. Like, usually I try to make my stories at least as enjoyable to just read the text of as it is to listen to me read them. That's one element that doesn't carry over quite as well to just the text. That was an element that was designed to be read out loud, because I have a pretty specific voice for Cowell, I think. That's separate from my other British accents. Because I can do a British accent. I can even do a British accent in male, and I can do a very different British accent voice. But Cowell's a very specific voice, a specific way of talking, as it were. And that was kind of my signifier of hey, it's Cowell. Cowell's here. So yeah, the goddamn butler did it. Let's see. Yep, and then we're talking about my grandma. Sisters Dukov is a throwback. I still intend to do the Sisters Dukov. The Sisters Dukov made me realize, though, that I need an editor to edit those, because, and to be fair, part of it was the time period. I was really struggling with my writing back then. And I was not happy with any of the Sisters Dukov episodes. Reading them back now, oh, absolutely. I think they're really good stories. But at the time, I was just in a weird multi-year writer's block that just, I was not happy with anything I was writing at the time. That compounded with the fact that the stories were super long, compounded with the fact that I had to basically read them over like 5 times by the time I was done with the entire process of producing them. Even if I'm not in that place anymore, even if I'm back on my writing shit like I usually am, that's a story that I need someone to edit for me, because if I'm gonna do a full voice cast for it, because that I can't do it, man. It's too much. It's too much. So I'll bring it back someday, but it will not be probably in the immediate future. It'll be a very long-term project, I think. But Tep has to have a story. Listen, Tep's like Doug. Tep's been in my brain even longer than Doug. Tep has to have a fucking story. The Vol is the same war we see in the Apocalypse Club. No. The Apocalypse Club is non-canon, unfortunately. It will never be canon. Don't ever try to read too deeply into it. Originally, I'll probably talk more about this when I inevitably do a Q&A for Edie Valley after I finish the last arc finally coming up. But no, the Apocalypse Club is not canon. I still have it in the Edie Valley playlist as a tone setter, but it's not a canon story. Let's see. Katya is Sonia's mom, yes. Nico's mom does in fact got it going on. I kind of want to see what Katya's up to now. I won't go into detail. Let's say I have plans. I have plans for Katya. You can also thank Dragon for the fact that I have plans for Katya. I have plans for Katya. She very rapidly went from like just a whatever character to like one of my favorite characters in the book. I'm very pissed off. What does happen to Katya after she comes to the reality we know as Edie Valley? I won't say a lot, because her story is slowly gonna fall into place as we keep going with shit. But she has a much happier life than she had in the Volkov Manor. That I will say. I can confirm that at the very least. When Katya isn't on screen, people should be asking, where is Katya? Okay, let's see. What else have we got? If Hedgehog is your baseline for normal, you may want to rethink that. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Russian accents are great. Why was this stream recommended to me? I don't know. You should go read Das Vadanya, though. It's a book I wrote. You're probably still not even here. You probably left, but it's fine. Well, you can introduce me with a Russian accent. Fair enough. Are you a cool guy? Maybe that's why. Oh, you're talking to Fireblade. Cool. Okay, they're all talking about it. Okay. Thank you for covering me as I was talking. Go check it out. Hedge. I tell you, death definitely means something to me, at least. Another question that maybe you won't be able to answer, but is the Vulcan in any way, shape, or form related to a certain other entity from another project of yours? You'll notice I very specifically use the term anomaly in Das Vadanya. I also use the term anomaly in my other in Edie Valley too. Yes. I can confirm that. I've never understood why some Russian names are written with K instead of just X. For example, Kazakhstan, on Russian it's written Kazakhstan. I don't know. Not seeing Mishka that much anymore is kind of saddening, but it's alright. I can always read Das Vadanya again. Yeah, no. I mean, my universe is vast and broad. A lot of characters sometimes just get left by the wayside because I have other stories I want to tell. But Mishka had a whole book to himself. Das Vadanya was kind of Mishka's book. In Edie Valley, Mikhail was always a supporting character. He will always remain a supporting character. But we haven't seen the last of him, at the very least. I can confirm that. Cowl, does he serve a narrative purpose, or is he your stand-in for connecting stories to one another? Both. Both. You seem to have caught on to the fact that Cowl seems to be written as very separate from all of the stories he appears in. That's done very much on purpose. Specifically in Das Vadanya. He fits in a little better in Edie Valley, but specifically in Das Vadanya, it's done very much on purpose. He doesn't feel like he fits into Das Vadanya. But he does absolutely have a purpose. For sure. For sure. If we do see one of the dead characters again, it would be nice to see Ivan come back as a ghostly spirit, just to be mean to him. Yeah, again, I like to keep my characters dead, but I like to fuck with my still living characters, so we'll see. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Okay, let's see. Vasily's perishing and all of this in general does kind of give Mishka's character in Edie Valley some more, depth, I suppose. Yeah, exactly. Hello, Jennifer Arasures. This has been the case in Russia since ancient times. The higher the pressure, the stronger the concrete. Okay, serious question about Cal. He mentioned that he doesn't get involved as a personal rule. Would there be any consequences where he would choose to break that rule? He's already broken that rule, actually. In Edie Valley, he's definitely broken that rule. He's gotten involved several times. What that means for Cal and Das Vadanya, who knows? Yeah, Dragon can't hear Noah. A moment that really stuck with me was at the end when the Volk started talking about, I forget exactly what, but it would be something Jack as a tutor would know. It felt like Jack had affected the Volk. Oh, yes. So, in one of the last chapters, I believe it's chapter 18, the Volk starts mentioning he makes reference to the Great Whore of Babylon, which is from Revelations, from the Bible. The reason I included that was actually because I was reading a book about how Revelations from the Bible has been viewed throughout history. It's a very interesting, fascinating book. So it's the reason I actually included it, was because it was just on my brain. But I thought it would be an interesting moment because the Volk obviously isn't a very scholarly character. He doesn't really think with his head so much as his invisible ghost cock, as it were. So it's definitely something that Jack would know, though, being a British man from 1908 and being a scholar. So yeah, I really that was the moment that I really wanted to make it apparent that Jack's kind of altered the Volk a little bit. Jack won't entirely disappear, even if he will mostly disappear. Have you heard the story about the boy who screamed wolves? Yes, I have. What is the best singular story you've written? It can be Das Vadanya, Edie Valley, or your others. Edie Valley is hard to talk about because Edie Valley is so broad and has so many different stories that I don't really consider Edie Valley like one big project. I mean, it is, but like I consider a lot of its stories to be very separate entities from each other. The problem is it's hard to really like compare because all the stories I've written have been very, very different. And I do that on purpose. I really like to play around with my own narration style because I do have a very specific narration style. I write stories in very specific ways. But I like to play around within that narration style. So Edie Valley is very modern. It's very groovy. It's very groovy. It's very it uses a lot more like slang language and a lot more like modern language than a lot of traditionally written books do. And again, I do that on purpose because all the characters are teenagers. Noah hates Edie Valley so much. He despises it because all the characters are constantly smarming at each other, and he hates that. He thinks they're all negative assholes. And yes, they're all written to be assholes. But Das Vadanya was written very much in that classical kind of Lovecraft kind of pseudo-Victorian, pseudo-20th century kind of style of writing. And it leans into purple prose sometimes. It gets very formal. It gets very flowery. It was kind of my story that I'm like, okay, this is the one story that I'm just going to flex on him. And then I'm going to go back to saying fuck a lot and wiggling sweater arms and, oh my! But Das Vadanya was kind of the story I wanted to flex in. So I wanted to narrate it very differently. But because of that, I don't really have a favorite. I have individual moments from each of those stories that are my favorite. Like I mentioned, chapter 11 is one of my favorites. Chapter 14 is also one of my favorites from Das Vadanya. And I'm really actually a big fan of the epilogue. As much as it's kind of unconnected to Das Vadanya, written very differently. I really like the epilogue. Thank you, Gerbil, for the Apocalypse Club not become canon because that'd make GLaDOS canon. It's true. If you haven't watched Gerbil's video where GLaDOS reads the Apocalypse Club. Plans for Katya, you say? Hedgehog has plans for Katya, but do you have plans to support Hedgehog's plans? If not, then you should start by donating to her stream elements. Hell yeah, baby! My finest moment, liking Katya. It's true. It's true. Okay. I recall you mentioning that a motivator for writing Das Vadanya was a desire to write a darker story. How much did Das Vadanya scratch that itch? More than I can possibly say. I don't think I will ever need to write another story as dark as Das Vadanya because I've gotten it out of my system. A little bit of that is because, like I kind of mentioned briefly, I came up with a lot of the ideas for Das Vadanya when I was about 16 through 18. I still came up with more, and the characters kind of shifted. Yvonne's original characterization was much more murdery, actively murdery. Like, you see a little bit of remnants of it in chapter 4 when he, in a fit of, madness, almost chokes Natalia out. But his characterization was much more murderous. Natalia was originally much less sympathetic. She kind of ended up veering back into unsympathetic as I wrote Katya, but as her backstory kind of came into place, as her motivations kind of came into place, she became much less just slimy than she used to be. Maria became much more of a character and much more of an active presence, and Maria drew a lot from my own experience with chronic illness and how that affects a person. Its original creation was very edgy, and it's still very edgy. It's still very dark. It's still very edgy. I don't think I would have come up with the idea for Das Vadanya today. I don't think I would have come up with an idea for a story like that anymore. Probably. Because I'm a very different person than I was when I was, 17, 18 years of age. But at the same time, I'm glad I wrote it. I'm glad I got it out. I'm glad I got something dark out. Because now I can stop using rape as a plot device. But no, I wanted to write something artsy and dark and weird and funky and edgy because I wanted to see if I could do it and still make it enjoyable to read. Because I'll write edgy things in the future, for sure. Nothing I ever write I think will ever be quite as dark. Obviously, Edie Valley goes into some pretty dark places. All of my stories will go into some pretty dark places, but I don't want the tone of my future works to be as overly dark and oppressive. I wanted Das Vadanya to be kind of different. It will always kind of end up being the black sheep of my writing roster, but I think that's a good thing. I think that's a really good thing, and I'm very proud of it. At the very least. Okay, let's see. I do believe that I did tell you that if Mishka was, say, 21 in 1908, he'd be over 110, so I did notice that that time period shift was off. So, there's an explanation for that. Well done for noticing the time period shift. Obviously, Edie Valley's world... so, obviously, the reality that they came from is not the same reality as Edie Valley. It is its own little bubble of 1908 in Russia. So it's not really 1908 in Russia. It's my 1908 in Russia. And Edie Valley is a modern day time period. These two things coexist simultaneously. That's what I'll say about it. That one's too much about Edie Valley. I don't want to talk about that one. You meant singular, like the stories. I'll talk more about my favorite Edie Valley stories when we have the Edie Valley stream. Since it's Sonia, Katya's. Oh, okay, yeah, you're talking about that. Okay, cool. Yeah, chronic illness, something you and me share, Herb Group. Yeah, so it's not really something I'm actively dealing with a lot anymore. I kind of finally found a way to at least make it bearable, or at least more than bearable. I rarely have any issues with it now, but starting in about early 2020, which, you know, kind of coincided with the COVID pandemic. It was great. Early 2020 to about mid 2021, I was dealing, and maybe even like late 2021, I was dealing with a chronic illness that didn't really put me in a lot of pain, but made me very uncomfortable and made me unable to really focus on writing or work all that much. You can notice a really visible drop off in my content right around that time. And it's because I was dealing with fucking shit. And obviously Maria's chronic illness is very different from my own. But it was something that I realized that, you know, like when I originally came up with Vadanya, she was kind of going to be the chronically ill migraine girl always. But I hadn't ever really had a lot of experience in being sick for a very long period of time, and how much that frustrates you, and how much that just absolutely just demolishes your life sometimes in ways that suck. My chronic illness wasn't bad. Like, compared to the shit even my own mother has gone through, like, my chronic illness wasn't bad. But it's still a matter of, you know, fucking frustration and fucking feeling not well and it sucking. And I realized that I could, you know, now writing it now, I could include a lot of that, and I could, you know, that became a much more central element of Maria's character than it used to be. And I'm very grateful, at the very least, that I was able to use it for something, because originally Maria was much more, her purpose was to kind of be Maria's love interest, but now with this added element, I was able to kind of make her more than that. I was able to give her her own concerns and her own problems outside of her budding relationship with Mishka, and I'm glad I was able to do that. Another question that might be a bit harder to answer. When you decided that Natalia would become the Vul, what was your process when designing Rainy for her? Like, her description was very cool. So, I can't go into a whole ton of detail about it. Needless to say, these are really long-term plans, but we will eventually be seeing more of the Vul. It's all kind of a metaphor. It's a metaphor that might not make sense to people right now. Because, obviously, she's got very doll-like features. She has ball-jointed fingers. She has a cracked porcelain face. She has, you know, red lips that don't move. Those features are very much on purpose. They very much serve a purpose. They very much piss her off. That's what I will say. Yeah, it's not something I can go into a whole ton of detail yet. But, like the Vul, all of the anomaly characters, the Truth, the Volk, the Vul, all are metaphors. They're characters, for sure. I'm not a big fan of making characters that are metaphors before they are characters. But they are metaphors. What they are? You gotta read between the lines to figure that out. Who's the character in the thumbnail? That's Natalia. Yeah, I haven't shouted him out yet, but Dragon did the thumbnail entirely unprompted. Actually, this time, it wasn't even originally intended to be the thumbnail, but he just drew it one day. If you zoom in the thumbnail, you'll find a little secret in it. Or if you're watching on TV, you'll probably be able to see a little bit of it. But there's a secret on the thumbnail. Been excited for this stream. The reveals of Vadanya have been weighing on me for so long. It's true. Dragon's been in the know for too long. Poor Dragon. said to keep his mouth shut for so long. In our country, Nikolai Romanov is considered the emperor, but some foreigners still call him Tsar. I've always wondered why. I mean, I've always heard the term Tsar. That's what we're taught in school. That's what I've read in all of the nonfiction books I've read outside of school. I don't know. I think it's because the role of the Tsar is a little bit different and a little more autocratic than other emperors in the past or other monarchs around that time. So I think they use the term Tsar probably to differentiate what the ruling of the country entails. Would be my guess, at least. I really wish we had more Hot Chuck Cinematic Universe art. All right, so we've been talking for about an hour and 15 minutes. I sense that we're winding down a little bit, which I kind of expected. The ARG Q&A was only about an hour and a half, too. So I'm going to wait a minute, see if there are any final questions. If anybody wants me to talk in a little more detail about the ending, I probably can. I can probably enlighten you on a couple of things if anybody has any questions about that. But otherwise, I'll wait a couple minutes. Let's see what we've got. The thumbnail is Natalia and Jack. Yes, the thumbnail is Natalia and Jack. I mentioned this in a comment on the epilogue video, but truly, I cannot thank you enough for allowing us to glimpse this bizarre universe you're making. Well, I'm glad I can share it all with you. Seriously, I've been feeling kind of down recently because when I started this channel, I obviously gained a fuck ton of viewership immediately, and then it all kind of fell off because most people weren't there for me. They were there for DPLC stuff. And I've been feeling kind of down because I did lose, a year and a half to that chronic illness that I could have been working on my YouTube career, and finally it's kind of starting to take off on the New Analysis channel, finally, after a year of work. But I just felt like I would, be a little further by now. I felt like I would have more people reading my stories, but I need to take a step back sometimes, and I need to realize that there are people that read my stories, and there are people that love my stories and really cherish them. And as small as the people, as small as the fan base is, the fact that I have people that read my stories at all is way more than so many people throughout history have ever gotten. And I'm so glad that I can share them with you. I relish the reactions from people. Like, when I write stories, I actively think, oh, this is going to make them so angry with me. This is going to make them so upset with me. And you can imagine me rubbing my little gremlin fingers together because now I have a fan base that is waiting for me to do more art. And it makes me really, really, really fucking happy that people enjoy the stuff I write. I think if I hadn't had this fan base, if I hadn't written E.D. Valley when I did, and I tried to get published after college, I might have stopped writing because, no one ever took my stories. I had one magazine that might have been interested, but then they had to shut down before I could, really properly get a story published with them. And I've always been a person who's kind of down on myself about my abilities. I have a lot of trouble with kind of realizing the own objective merit of my art. And when I don't get acknowledgement, it kind of makes me upset. I don't want to say makes me upset. That sounds like I'm a little baby. But I'm someone who just needs external acknowledgement for the stuff I make because that's what gives it worth for me, is sharing it with other people. And if I hadn't had that fan base that was already telling me my stories were good, that was already, just enraptured by my worlds and my characters, I might have quit. But I didn't. I just realized, when I was at the peak of my frustration with this whole process, with having to wait months on end for people to not get back to me, having to just do all this waiting and do all this, no one's going to take my stories because they're too weird. It just made me realize that I wanted what I had, which was just people, which is just no fucking bullshit in between, no fucking garbage, no third parties, just me writing my stories and sharing them with people. I like that direct connection I have with my audience. So that's why I came back. And I was always intending to come back to some extent. I would have come back sooner, probably. But I'm glad I'm back now, and I'm glad there's a lot of you who are still there and are still watching and still listening. Hopefully someday soon there'll be more of you. But for now, I'm happy with what I've got. I'm very happy with what I've got. Let's read the last quote. The creative drive I get from them is insane. All of your stories make me so happy, even when they're just make me very uncomfortable. So just thank you so much. Yeah, you kind of need a specific kind of person to read my stories sometimes. Is Volk a pseudonym or what? No, the Volk is no pseudonym. The Volk is the Volk. The Volk is the wolf. Hedrick, trust me, there's no need to feel down. We read your stories not because we like to see it, not because we liked them, because we like you. It's a small handful, but hey, we're one of the most tight-knit fan bases on the internet because we're so small. It'll be a bittersweet thing if you'd be bigger, because then we won't connect. I'm glad you're still here, too. Trust me, if I didn't like your stories, I wouldn't spend many nights spilling my thoughts to you. Fair enough. But yeah, no, seriously, thank you guys again. I think this is the time to end the stream with that being said. Next week, we're going to have the Edie Valley quiz. I'm very excited. I'm sure some of you will be there. I'm sure a couple other people will probably be there too who didn't quite catch up on Vadanya in time, but have been waiting for Edie Valley to come back. At the end of the Edie Valley quiz, I will be previewing the Arc 3. I have one or two fun things to show you. One thing that some of you have already seen, but I can also spill a little bit of information. So if you're interested in hearing about that, I am so excited for the stream next week. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for bearing with me for this extended kind of... Oh, hold on. I missed a question. I forgot. I know it's the answer, but I feel like it's a good bridging point about the universe. How does this affect Howie Byrne's canonicity? Howie Byrne is dubiously canon at best. There's a lot of elements from Howie Byrne that are still canon. There's a lot of elements that aren't. Specifically the characterizations of one or two characters. And how they relate to the world and the cosmos at large. Again, I'll be going into that very soon. Believe me. Okay. Edie Valley is pronounced like Edie Valley. Who is Ed Valley? I'll definitely be there. I'm going to wipe the floor with everyone. The hype fixation is real, and I intend to abuse it to its full extent. Abso-fucking-lutely. I'm excited. It's going to be great. I'm so fucking excited to bring Edie Valley back. Literally, I've been doing some of the best writing of my life, I think, the last 2 or 3 months when I'm probably a good 8 stories in right now, maybe 9. So I'm actually probably about a third of the way done writing it already, which I expected to be about 4 stories in by the time I was able to share anything with you guys, but I'm way further than that. I'm very excited to share it all with you. I'm definitely so excited to see the heated combat of next stream. It's gonna be great. Dragon's disqualified, so he's gonna just piss around the whole time, but it's gonna be awesome. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for having my extended 2-week birthday celebrations about my stories. I appreciate it. And have a good night. Farewell.